you got a wall up so high. She's like, I had to climb a wall just to get to you. And I got used to people leaving me, right? You know, my brother was murdered when I was 16.
Right.
My mother was diagnosed with schizophrenia, right? And so my dad, you know, was at a point addicted to drugs. So those people were gone.
This is a journey.
Let me take you on a journey.
There will still be the journey.
The journey.
New sheriff in town, and the name is
The Journey.
Journey.
This thing is bigger than Nino Brown. This is The Journey.
The journey.
What is it that moved you?
The Journey. The Journey. The Journey.
Welcome back to another episode of The Journey. I'm your host, Larry Robinson, and today we have another great Memphis icon. But before we get to him, I want to share a quote with you from the great Quincy Jones, musician and producer. Not 1 ounce of my self-worth depends on your acceptance of me. And what that means to me is, listen, if you gotta believe in something, believe in yourself. Seriously, believe in you, because you gotta be your biggest cheerleader. Today we have Dr. Marcus Matthews, straight out of North Memphis, author, educator, and an entrepreneur. But more than anything, I want to emphasize the author piece because he's had 2 books that we know about that is tremendous and one that I think will definitely make an impact on the way urban kids are taught. Without further ado, Dr. Marcus Matthews. How you doing, sir?
Doing well, brother.
Good.
Doing well.
Good.
Appreciate you bringing me out today.
Well, you know, we're glad to have you. We're honored to have you. So we're going to start. Tell us about where you were raised, the beginnings of Marcus.
Okay. So born and raised here in Memphis, Tennessee, more specifically a neighborhood called Frazier.
Okay.
We call it the Bay.
All right.
In the north side of town, North Memphis.
Right.
Interestingly enough, my dad was at that time a fireman.
Okay.
And we were like the first or second black family on that street when he bought the house in 1978.
Oh, wow.
So that's 2 years before I was actually born.
Okay.
Before that, they were in Hyde Park, which is in North Memphis as well. Bought his house, and by the time I was 16 in Memphis, in Frazier, same neighborhood, man, people being robbed on the street. You know?
Okay. Well, hold on. Tell me someone who had a tremendous impact on you outside of your parents.
I would definitely say educators.
Oh, really?
And I didn't name one in particular because so many educators had an impact on my life that it would behoove me to just say it collectively versus.
Let me get a favorite. Educator. Somebody that just really put their hand on Marcus and just really led him in a way that you couldn't have seen yourself going without him.
Wow. So I'm gonna lose some mentors after this. I stay so connected to the people who helped me.
Okay.
But I think about Dr. Eleanor Grusin, who's a professor emeritus at the University of Memphis.
Okay.
And she wrote a grant for this journalism education program that ended up leading me to college. Okay. And really changed my life, you know, through my work in journalism.
Shout out.
Yeah, Dr. Grusin, Dr. G.
All right. Tell me a decision you made as a young person that ended up having a long-lasting impact, but you didn't know it at the time.
I would go back to that very same program. So I was in high school. I started writing poetry, right?
Okay.
And my English teacher was like, "You're a pretty good writer."
Okay.
And so from there, I started sharing my writing with them to the point where in 12th grade, that's where this outreach program was all throughout Memphis City schools.
Okay.
And one of my teachers said, "You should apply for this. You should try this out." And of course I did not, right? And one day she basically snatched me in the hallway and was like, "Marcus, you're gonna apply for this program. You're gonna sit down and fill out the application right now." And I did. And again, I was one of the top writers, journalists in that program, which led to a journalism scholarship at the University of Memphis, which led to a journalism degree, which led to News Editorial Student of the Year, which led to the commercial appeal and, you know, becoming an author.
What do you think that teacher saw in you that made you say, you got to do this?
That again, I think will go back to the teacher before, right? The teachers before, because this was just my regular schoolwork. And my English teacher, 9th grade, Kevin Williams, we're gonna shout out Coach Williams. He looked at my work and said, man, you're a pretty good writer. And from there, I was like, well, what you think about this?
Oh, wow.
So I hit him with some poetry. And at that time, we had some internal turmoil in the home. I was depressed. I was angry. And it showed through my writing. And so what he did was, before I left 9th grade, he went to my 10th grade teacher and said, you got to read Marcus's poetry. And then my 10th grade teacher became my 11th grade teacher. And my 11th grade teacher went to my 12th grade teacher and was like, you got to make sure you read Marcus's poetry. So I had a reputation within the school as being a writer. And it goes back to that teacher taking a special interest and just giving me that encouragement.
Hold on. Don't go too far into the story.
Okay.
How different are you from the person you dreamed you'd be when you were young?
Very different, you know.
What'd you dream you'd be? Who'd you dream you'd be?
Either an NBA player or a firefighter, right?
One of the two.
Like I said, my dad was a firefighter, and every kid in the hood has hoop dreams. Right. So, I saw myself as an everyday guy. I never thought that the work that I'm currently doing and have done would impact, so many thousands of people.
Who did you, when you were looking up to people outside of the household, was there anybody in particular that stood out to you?
Going back to the same outreach program, man. Otis Sanford.
Oh, yeah.
He's political commentary locally here in Memphis. And he came to our journalism workshop and was talking about his start as a sports reporter.
Okay.
And so, I was playing basketball at the time, track, cross country. And for him to be a black man who loved to write, black man, professional, loved to write, loved sports, and getting paid for it. Like, you getting paid to write about sports. You getting paid to write. Right. So I'm sitting in the audience, 17 years old, about to go to the 12th grade. Like, I got to do what he doing.
Okay, when did you know you were going to be okay? When did it click in Marcus and said that, yeah, I can do this. I can do this thing called life?
That's a great question. I guess it depends on what you call okay.
Okay.
Because I've been going through so many epiphanies, right? And just having epiphanies and going through the cycle of life and really redefining what my values are and understanding what success really is. So, there was a period where I defined success externally.
I got it.
We're gonna
unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. That's important. That's when I read that, right, and I listened to you, and I'm thinking that question, is a very that's a piece.
Real quickly, what's your why?
Man, helping people.
Helping people. That's beautiful. So this is the question that most people really kind of get stuck on, and because they have to think about it a little bit. But Marcus, tell me, when was the first time you realized you was a black man?
Yeah.
Hold on for a quick second. Listen, we're going to be right back. What Marcus is going to share with us when he realized he was a brother. Be right back on the journey. Don't go nowhere. Come looking for you if you do.
KUDZUKIAN.
Is based in Memphis, but it is international.
A new building, an expanded team, new equipment, a new studio, all inside of 7 years.
The resources that we were able to utilize with KUDZUKIAN and their team has been incredible. And our partners at KUDZUKIAN has been a large part of our success.
One, it's Black owned. So we get to tell our own stories in our own way. I'm so proud of the founder, Larry Robinson, and his entire family and all of the team here at KUDZUKIAN.
We are so proud of their progress that they've made here in Memphis.
With social media and the technology we have today, the world is listening.
KUDZUKIAN. Check out all your KUDZUKIAN favorites now. Download the KUDZUKIAN app, available on Android and iOS.
Welcome back to The Journey. I'm your host, Larry Robinson, and today we have Dr. Marcus Matthews. And before we left, Dr. Matthews was going to share with us when he realized the first time that he was a brother. Doc?
Yes, sir. So again, growing up in Fraser, I was mostly around Black people for the most part.
Right.
But W.E.B. Du Bois talks about double consciousness, right?
Okay.
In his book, Souls of Black Folks. So you got being Black in Black America versus being Black in white America. And so my first real interaction with white America is when I attended the University of Memphis, right? And so I remember being in my English class and I knew nothing about what was going on. And I was always...
What do you mean? Unpack that. You knew nothing.
So when we started talking about, British literature and, Chaucer, and we were talking about all these different figures and literary works, right? Stuff that everybody else read in high school.
Right.
I hadn't read it.
Okay.
I wasn't familiar with it. Lovely senior teacher, she tried to, best to get us through Macbeth,
right.
But it was the hood, know, and so I didn't really realize what it was supposed to be, right? What I should have known when I got there until I was in the classroom. And, of course, me being a talkative person that loves to converse and loves intellectual conversation, I went back and read as much as I could.
Right.
I went, on the internet and I'm just trying to do as much homework as I can. So when I get back to class, I can participate in the discussion. But it was that moment like, they writing the names on the board and the students are talking and I'm like, man, I don't know what. Like, now
how did that equate to you for the first time realizing you were Black?
Well, I knew that there was a reason that everybody else knew what was going on and I didn't.
Okay.
I knew that it was something, like, y'all had to read this in high school.
Right.
Why didn't I read this in high school? Right?
Okay.
And it was because of the high school that I attended. And I loved my high school. I learned a lot in high school and from high school, but I realized the inequalities, that were present. And I didn't equate it to Black then. I just was like, something's not right. Okay. But when I moved into education and like now the way, I understand so much more now.
Right. And I truly want you to unpack the education side, the reason you are Dr. Marcus Matthews.
Right.
So let's go back to your childhood real quick, just to kind of set the scene. Childhood and family life. Father, mother, sisters, brothers, what's the home life look like?
Yeah, I was raised by my biological parents, my mom and dad. They're now separated, but they were, of course, married. Through all of my childhood, I had 3 brothers.
Okay.
Rest in peace to Marlon, who was murdered in 1996, September 13th. My 3 living brothers, both husbands and fathers.
So you had a brother that was murdered?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in the Bay. Yeah.
Man, I can't even imagine. How old were you?
I was 16. He was 23.
How'd you deal with that?
I didn't realize how much I had internalized until, again, much later in life. So like a lot of the stuff you'll say, like the light bulb went off later. Early, I was just living, just dealing with it. And my writing was huge for me. It was an escape for me.
That's how you coped, huh?
Yeah, sports.
Right.
And it's interesting, my father has given me permission to talk about certain things from our childhood because, it wasn't always pleasant.
Okay.
And I'm very careful because now my father, we have a great relationship, but he made some decisions that our family had to deal with. Right. And I tell people all the time, I'm so glad I grew up with my father in my home. He got his mail the same place I got my mail.
Right.
But there was a lot of absence there, right? And starting off, my dad's a brilliant guy.
Right.
Like he can quote Shakespeare right now.
Okay.
That kind of brilliant. And he moved from the country, what we call the country in Tipton County. I'm not sure if you know about, Covington and all out there, but that's where my dad was raised. My mom was raised in Brighton. So small town country folk, right?
Right.
Sharecroppers, right? And so he moved to Memphis to go to college, University of Memphis. But he discontinued his education, after my mom had her second child, their second child.
Had to make that money.
Yeah, working 2-3 jobs until he got to a point where he got on with the fire department and boom.
Let me ask you something about that. As a child, did you ever see, because I'm sure your dad's dreams were somewhat deferred.
Yeah, absolutely.
How did that impact the family? And how did that impact you in particular?
Well, the impact was honestly, he took to the street.
Oh.
And he wasn't present the way we would have liked for him to be present, because he was coping, right? He was definitely disappointed, not being able to finish college and, having to work these jobs and not be able to, show his brilliance.
Right.
And so that was his cope was to, hang out with the fellas, out there in Hyde Park, and so we missed him. We missed him. And I think that again, that balance is so delicate because I got friends that have seen their father like twice in life, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I got friends who've never seen their dad
at all.
And dad, and through my work, I've seen so much, in terms of what happens in families. So I'm very grateful that I had a father who was present, in whatever shape, form, or fashion, he was present. And he was a disciplinarian. He was a proponent of education. He, held a high standard. So that love was there, but he was struggling. And so it affected me later because I ended up divorced. Because I could kind of feel like I don't want to end up like my dad. I'm not happy in this situation. My wife is having to deal with the fact that I'm not myself.
Right.
Which really ripped that relationship apart and, ended up in a divorce.
You've touched on your youth.
Right.
And you've touched on, college years by going to University of Memphis. But I want to deal with the work that you do.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, because you wrote a book called Urban Aces.
Yes, sir.
And many people don't talk about Urban Aces. And what ACE is an adverse childhood event. But they come in so many different colors and flavors in the urban setting. Can you talk about that just a little bit and why you decided to write that book?
Sure. When I first became experienced with ACEs, I was working with one of the local school districts here, and we got the quick and dirty training, right?
Right.
And I realized that I was suffering, from adverse childhood experiences, and like it impacted a lot of why I was doing what I was doing. And I could see, like a lot of my behaviors from childhood, even some that were still existent, were connected to things I had gone through as a child, And so I became really curious.
Give us an example of something that kind of you carried from childhood to adulthood.
So I think about, just in a past relationship, man, like a young lady told me, she said, you got a wall up so high. She's like, I had to climb a wall just to get to you. And I got used to people leaving me, right? My brother was murdered when I was 16.
Right.
My mother was diagnosed with schizophrenia, right? And so my dad, was at a point addicted to drugs. So those people were gone. Even if not physically gone, they were not emotionally available.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Sometimes not physically available, but that emotional availability, man, is deeper. It's real deep. So I just got used to people leaving. And so it's like, you be around for a minute, it's all good. When you roll, you roll. That's not a way to build a healthy relationship.
Right.
But that was a defense mechanism that I had built around myself so that I wouldn't be hurt if somebody had to leave my life.
Got it. So now that we talked about ACEs, unpack that a little bit for those that are listening or viewing. How do we deal with ACEs? And as an adult, how do we change some of those, or at least identify and change some of the things that have impacted us from childhood?
So adverse childhood experiences, usually you're looking at 3 categories, which would be like household dysfunction, which would be a parent in jail or a parent who's abusing a drug, right? Or an absent parent. Then you have abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, cussing at your kids, whatever. Right. And then you also have your household dysfunction, your abuse, and your neglect. So it could be physical neglect, not getting food, emotional neglect, not being told I love you and hugged, right? So that's typically what it looks like. But the CDC, right, Center for Disease Control here in the United States, basically put out a statement that said systematic racism and economic disadvantage also lead to chronic stress.
Right.
So, systematic racism, that's the history of the black man in America, right? And black woman. So if you're black, you can go ahead and move that needle at least one time, because more than likely you've endured some systematic racism, which goes back to, my educational situation, in Fraser. Like that's systematic racism, that I don't get the education that other people get.
Right.
And so I had to add that piece to the book, right? I couldn't just say ACEs. I had to put that urban piece in there, because this is the way I say it. If you get a hamburger and I get a hamburger and we both got lettuce, cheese, tomato, right? We got the same burger.
Right.
But if you give me some onions and put mushrooms, my burger is different.
Right.
We ain't got the same burger no more.
Right.
So when you throw in systematic racism and economic disadvantage, my ACE is different than the rest of the world.
Wow.
Yeah, it's different. So and those other things, right? Abuse, no color, no gender. Anyone can experience abuse.
Right.
Anybody's dad can die, but everybody is not dealing with being racially profiled, right? And you talked about remembering you're black, man. I remember going to the community center and the police just grabbing me up, searching me, the hood hot, they ride around the hood, make the car hot, then you put your face on the hood, that whole situation, because you looking for somebody. And I'm riding in the Chevy back then. I used to have the box Chevy,
right.
You know what I'm saying, peanut butter with the blue rag, with the crackers on it, you pulling over the Chevy because I'm in it, and you got me on the high hood, white cop, black cop comes up, they get a description. I don't fit this description at all. I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt. This dude had on like jeans and a hoodie or something. Like It was not even me.
Right.
And I was just like, all right, bye.
Man.
I was going to Ed Rice, what I'm saying, to play some ball.
Right.
I'm in the hood. I'm freshman in college on break. All right, let me go up here to the community center, shoot some ball.
Right.
Like those things don't happen to everybody.
No, they don't.
So we have to consider that urban piece when we talk about adverse childhood experiences.
How has Memphis impacted your career and your development?
It's been major. I used to say I was half country, half hood. That used to be my joke. Because my parents were raised out in Tipton County.
Yeah.
And my grandparents, and so like on the weekends we would go feed the chickens and all that good stuff. But during the week, I was in urban America.
Right.
Like I said, my neighborhood experienced white flight. Right. So Fraser was the place to go, back in the late 70s. But as the black people moved in, right, there goes the neighborhood. And then, the white population who can afford to moves out. And the black population who can afford to, moves out. And so I watched Fraser experienced that decline. And so I'm so grateful that my family gave me that core, those values. And I know a lot of my friends didn't have that.
Okay.
You know, I took a couple of my friends out to the country, what we call it, out to T County, and they like, wow, your granddaddy got pigs and chickens and, you know what I'm saying? And like, 4th of July, he would have a special, where he would feed the good corn and, he'd get that thing ready for the family, and we would cook it out in the yard, from the rooter to the tutor.
Wow.
I had those kind of experiences. So it balanced me because, when you think about the hood, it's so competitive because people trying to get out. And so that competitiveness, it may sometimes lead you against your human values.
Right.
Will I steal? Mm-hmm. Will I kill? Will I sell drugs to my family and friends?
Whatever it takes.
Right.
Whatever it takes.
So I took the hustle from that though, right? I gotta get it.
Right.
I gotta get it, but I gotta get it while maintaining my values.
Right.
So I had that Memphis piece, I had that Tipton County piece, and I try to take the best of both worlds, and I added that education.
Okay. Any regrets?
Not listening more, not being a better listener.
Okay.
I've heard that you can learn through instruction or you can learn through experience, and I learned a lot through experience.
As they say, a hard head make a soft
man.
Behind.
Come on.
So go back to that kid sitting there watching cartoons on a Saturday morning in Fraser, eating a big bowl of cereal. What would you tell him if you could walk up and talk to that kid right now?
Man, listen to the people who love you.
Okay.
Listen to the people who love you. My dad used to always say, I ain't gonna tell you nothing wrong, son.
Right.
Whenever the counsel was gonna be something that I might not appreciate, he would lead with, I ain't gonna tell you nothing wrong, son. And, sometimes I felt like it was wrong.
Didn't we all?
But looking at it now, and I think about not just my dad, but just so many other people who cared about me.
Right.
I got what they call a work permit my senior year of high school. Mm-hmm. So I could leave school at 10:30.
Right.
Because I had a job at Fred's Super Dollar Store, right? With $1 buys more, right? So I'm leaving work so I can go and stock this bleach and put a little money in my pocket.
Right.
In order to do that, I dropped pre-calculus and I dropped AP physics and I dropped computer typing, what it was back then.
For a minimum wage job.
Yeah, I dropped those 3 classes. And Westside was so small that you had to have 5 people to make the class, right?
Right.
I was number 5. So the fact that I didn't take those classes, my classmates couldn't take those classes. It's one of the most selfish decisions I ever made in my life.
Wow.
But I was 17.
I understand.
Right? And the way my family situation was, you couldn't call home.
Right.
Because you think about it, if everything was like it was supposed to be, right? Or if everything was a little different, then it would be, well, I'm gonna call home and your dad not gonna let you drop this class.
Right.
No, my dad was out there bad at that time.
Right.
My mom was sick at that time. So Marcus really doing whatever Marcus want to do.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna ask Marcus. There's young men, young boys watching and listening to this, your journey, so to speak. Look in that camera right there and leave them with some Dr. Matthews-isms or one that they can carry with them.
Listen to the people who love you. It can make life so much easier for you. And you can be successful, you can get there, but it's so much easier to get there with help. We have communities of people here to support you. You have an educational system, you have mentor programs, you have things that you can attach yourself to allow people to attach themselves to you. If you don't have those family members that you can look up to, find somebody on the television that you look up to and study them. Find out who they really are. Find out what they do, their routines, because your routine defines you. What do you do every day? If you read every day, then you're a reader. You know, if you study every day, you're a student. If you hoop every day, you're a hooper. So what is your routine? What is it that you do every day? Think about what you do. Take time to meditate. Take time for silence. Because we get messages all day, every day. Your cell phone, the television, your teachers, your friends, your parents, the posters when you walk down the street, the billboards. We constantly receive messages, music. You need time to get away from those messages and get into yourself. You need some silent time every day to think so that you can process the messages that have been given to you all day, every day. And you can think through those messages and you'll figure out what makes sense. And you'll think about what the people who love you have told you, and you can meditate on that. You can chew on it, and you can make better decisions moving forward so you can be better today than you were yesterday. And you'll be better tomorrow than you were today. That's what I would say.
Dr. Marcus Matthews, thank you for sharing your journey and your Marcus-isms.
Appreciate you, bro.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Listen, we're going to keep bringing them. We're going to keep bringing these Memphis icons to you. And if you didn't get anything out of this, you got to believe in you. Believe in you, and you can do this. Till the next time, I'm Larry Robinson for our guest, Dr. Marcus Matthews. Till the next time, this is The Journey on the KUDZUKIAN Network. Thank you to our partner, the Grand Boulé of Sigma Pi Phi Fraternity Delta Chapter. To hear more incredible stories like this, be sure to download the KUDZUKIAN app from the App Store or Google Play, or check out the Journey Memphis podcast on all your major podcast providers. Also, check us out on the KUDZUKIAN Network.